Hello. We want to welcome you to this event on labor movement. We are going to explore various perspectives on labor movement in the United States. So welcome to this session. This morning we are joined by the following people. Hi everybody, my name is Parul Raval and I'm an Associate Professor of Education here at ECC. Along with my colleague here, Professor Antonio Ramirez, teaches Professor of History here. I also would like to introduce our panels, as you will be hearing from them. We have Dr. Jessica Cook today from DePaul University, Mr. Brian McSherry from Sheet Metal Workers Union from Elgin Trades Association. We also have Professor Kim Tarver from Elgin Community College Faculty Association from ECCFA, and we also have Ms. Jamie Peng from ECC's SSECCA Association. So with that, we want to give you some background and some information on labor movement, so I'm going to turn it over to Professor.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to use the mic because I don't have as good a teacher voice as Dr. Ravel does. But thank everybody for being here. This is a really nice turnout, and I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation about unions. And this event really started off with a conversation between Dr. Ravel and I about how unions are a really important part of the lives of teachers, right? So any of you, I know many of you, are thinking about becoming public school teachers. If you're going to become a public school teacher, you will be in a union, right? I was a high school teacher, and I just wanted to list some of the things that when I was a high school teacher, that unions helped defend my rights and working conditions in these areas. They helped defend my salary, my health benefits, my retirement savings, the size of my classroom, so how many students were in my classroom, how many classes I taught, the length of my prep periods, what I taught in the classroom, which textbooks I used, what disciplinary actions I took with students, and they helped provide me opportunities to attend conferences and continuing education classes to improve my teaching. So for me, as a high school teacher, union was a really important thing. And if you've been watching the news, you know that teachers are in the spotlight right now. Colorado teachers have walked off the job to protest underfunded public education and their dismal salaries. But the labor movement is not just government workers, it also includes non-unionized workers. Some of you may know that before working at ECC, I worked for several years with low-wage immigrant workers in the US and Mexico. Some of these workers were working in dangerous and deadly conditions. Other folks were paid less than $2 an hour, which is illegal, by the way, working at carnivals and seafood processing plants, cleaning homes, taking care of children, taking care of the elderly, picking fruit and vegetables on farms, working for moving companies, just to give a few examples. And these low-wage workers immigrant workers are a backbone of our national economy. But they're also part of the labor movement because through marches and protests, lawsuits, individual acts of bravery, they've stood up to unjust working conditions and immoral immigration laws. And they're a really important part of some of the movement that we're going to be exploring today. So these questions are really all wrapped up in the issues that you're going to hear about today. And as a history teacher, I like to go way back. So I like to say, that over the last 150 years, at least, unions and the labor movement in the United States have given us gifts as wonderful as the 8-hour workday, the weekend. They've helped build the American middle class. And today, unions are fighting to preserve those victories and fighting for dignified working conditions for everyone. So I want to thank you all for being here and being part of this important conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Jessica Cook, right now, and tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Cook became the director of the DePaul Labor Education Center in August 2016. She has more than 10 years of experience working and organizing with unions, first as a staff organizer with Unite Here International from 2006 to 2009, and then for 7 years as a leader and steward with the University of Illinois at Chicago Graduate Employees Organization while working as a grad instructor in sociology. She's worked closely with local worker centers since 2009, And Dr. Cook has a PhD in sociology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her doctoral research focused on the labor movement, worker centers, mass incarceration, criminalization, immigration, citizenship, race and ethnicity, civil society, precarious work, and labor market restructuring. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cook, but as we do that, if we could just give a round of applause to all our panelists.
Thank you. So everyone, I just want to kind of give us a broad overview before we get into the specifics from the panelists. So we're really glad you guys are here today because we think this is very important. You're here probably because you want to learn, but also because you want to get a good job, right? Right? And I want us to be participatory because I want to make sure that we're learning from each other. But the reason we're here is because we want to try to secure, a good livelihood for ourselves, right? We want to improve where we're at, we want to learn, we want to improve society, right? So this is part of all of that. So first off, I want to get a temperature of where we're at in terms of what is the labor movement. So first, raise your hands if you are in a union or you have family members who are, or you've even heard of unions. Okay, how many of you are actually in unions yourselves? Okay, so how many of you have family members that are? Okay, so we have a room that's at least a little bit familiar, but just to make sure that everybody in the room is coming from the same kind of place. Right now, there's about 10.7% of the working population in terms of those who are counted, right, who are in unions. And so in terms of private sector work, that's about 6.5% of people who are in the private sector, and about 34% of people who are in the public sector are unionized, okay? To give us some context, in the heyday, so to speak, in the highest levels of unionization in our country, in the 50s, around a third of all workers were organized. So we've gone from like over 33% to under 11%. And that's concerning for a lot of reasons. So you may have heard of, during that time, the 50s, if you're in history class, you learn a lot of people buying homes, right? A lot of people having a higher middle class status of life, right? More and more people going to college. And what do we see now? We see despicable inequality in our society, right? Based on race, gender, immigration status, but also just everybody is doing worse in proportion to when there was a lot more unions, right? And those of us on the panel here, we're gonna argue that's because when you have a union, you have a way to stand up and make sure that you're getting your fair share, a way to speak up and make sure that there's democracy at the workplace, right? But what are some of the myths that we hear about unions, just to get them out? What are some things that you've heard about unions? Positive or negative? Yeah.
They pay a lot more when you're in union.
Okay, so a worker pays more?
Yeah.
To who?
Oh no, like the worker gets paid.
Oh yeah, okay, yes, that's a truth. That's not a myth, yeah.
Negative myth, that if there's a union, it costs for every time the hammer is swung.
Okay, right, that it's more expensive for the work to get done, What else have you guys heard? I'm not saying you believe this, but what have you heard? Yeah.
You're less likely to get hired if you're in a union.
Interesting, so what do you, tell me more about that.
So like they just don't want to deal with unions. That's what I heard.
Okay, so that a lot of employers won't hire you if you're union, like if you're a craft worker or that kind of thing? Okay, Is there another hand? Anything else? You've never heard anything else about unions? That you get less benefits? That's fascinating. So so the part of the reason that people have unions, the big reason is that they actually do get any benefits, let alone better ones, right? So in general, you'll hear people say that unions are corrupt or they take your money, you got to pay all these dues. But what we're here to talk about is actually unions themselves are democratic entities. That's not to say that they're not human organizations and that sometimes some locals or some internationals are less democratic than others, but they are human organizations that are set up democratically, right? So members, the people who are part of the union, get to have a voice. They get to elect their officials, they get to determine how much the dues are, they get to participate in the bargaining of their contracts and voting on it, right? You don't usually hear about that in the news, right? Because there's a lot of interest by a lot of people to make sure that we don't know the benefits of a union, right? So I want us to think about how did we get here and then why are we so low in terms of the levels of unionization right now. So right now what the labor movement includes is the AFL-CIO, which is the umbrella for all unions, well, for most unions rather, in the U.S., right? So most unions in the U.S. are affiliated with this umbrella. It's an organization that helps with dealing with different things going on, helping make sure that people are connected, helping with information to the public, helping make sure that there's good legislation passed, right, for working people. But there's also another federation, the Change to Win Federation, which broke off from the AFL some years ago. Most unions are either now back in the AFL or in both. But just to give a spectrum, there's about 60 different unions in the U.S. currently. Some of them have many locals and different configurations, but in terms of like national level unions, there's about 60. There's also worker centers, as Antonio mentioned. So these are community-based labor organizations, community-based like nonprofits that support workers who are less often in unions, either because they are discriminated against in a lot of different kinds of occupations, or in occupations that are not legally recognized to be unionized, such as day labor workers and domestic workers, right? Or it's just kinds of industries that are really tough to organize, like the temp industry, the temp staffing industry. So these are organizations that are making sure that there's labor support and advocacy for people who are outside right now of unions. It doesn't mean that they can't be a part of it, but they need extra support. And they're disproportionately immigrants, often undocumented immigrants, but also a lot of black workers, especially workers who are really cut off from a lot of their civil rights if they have any kind of criminal record, right? So these are organizations that are helping people. There's also labor advocacy groups like Working America or Fight for 15. Have you guys heard of Fight for 15? You heard about like $15 minimum wage that's been going around for years? That came out of people organizing, right? That didn't just come up. Local city councils didn't just decide, you know what, let's raise the minimum wage. That's because people were fighting and organizing. And that's particularly retail and fast food workers, especially McDonald's workers, right? Saying, hey, you think that this is just some lowly job, but it's a job that makes so much money, and so many people are doing this work, and everybody deserves the dignity of having a good paycheck and respect at work and a voice on the job, right? But then we also have lots of legal groups that support workers. So these different groups kind of comprise the current labor movement in the US, okay? So to give a perspective, we'll talk a little bit more about the different kinds of industries, and it was mentioned in the introduction, but we have public sector workers like teachers, like people who work for the government, people who do healthcare work, but we also have tons of private sector workers everywhere from sheet metal work, from carpenters, all the way to people who work in some retail shops, right? All different kinds of jobs can be unionized, okay? And in general, you mentioned about benefits. Again and again, we see that the weekly earnings of somebody who's a member of a union and somebody who's not in any industry is significantly higher. There's more access to benefits, or benefits at all, right? And certainly better ones. And they are safer jobs because there's a way to make sure that there's accountability. Because when you have a contract, you have a way to talk with management, right? Where you're more of an equal to make sure that you get a voice on what kind of conditions you want to see in the workplace, right? But how did we get here? So have any of you guys heard of the Haymarket riots? So what do you remember in the back of the hat? What do you remember about this?
I remember hearing about it.
Okay, anybody else remember any details about that? Yes.
Workers at the International Harvester in Chicago were boycotting reduction in wages and the bringing of scabs. There was an incident with the police which resulted in a bombing and a police massacre.
Perfect, so you got the synopsis. So in 1886, right, we're 100 years into the Industrial Revolution, right? What was the Industrial Revolution? Does anybody remember? The most significant change in our kind of global world in terms of how relationships, interpersonal work, all different aspects of our world were changed because people were suddenly having to go work for a wage as opposed to working on their own land or providing their own sustenance, right? Not to say that there was not inequality, right, before. Certainly slavery, we've got serfdom, we've got all kinds of different situations, but this was a market shift where people were going to work for somebody else for a wage through a factory or other kind of arrangement, right? With that shift, we see the urbanization of our societies in Europe and here. We see people changing their family dynamics. We see people living in tight quarters, right? But we see people working in terrible, terrible conditions, right? And particularly see images of factories, right? We see people working for many, many hours, including children, and people were fighting, people were organizing. People are always organizing, right? I want us to think about that. People are always trying to figure out a way to improve their situation. We saw a groundswell of it. It sometimes ebbs and flows. There's sometimes more organizing and less, right? But people were organizing for better conditions at work for some time. And what we saw with the Haymarket riot in 1886 is people were specifically organizing for the 8-hour workday, something that many of us take for granted, although we're seeing a shift to us not having a standard workday as we did before. And we'll get back to why we need to keep organizing to protect those things that people fought for. But we saw that people were fighting for the 8-hour workday. What happened was there was a group of people organizing. Prior to that, there had been, the police had killed people who were protesting. There was a meeting, a little rally in the Haymarket Square, where you think it's in the West Loop, River West part of Chicago, that what it's called now. It was a market area, and suddenly a bomb was thrown, even though the mayor came out and supported this. He was like, hey, this looks cool, everybody's being peaceful, I'm gonna go home. And suddenly a bomb was thrown. It's never proven who threw it. Many people, the people who were hung for it and arrested for it were never proven to even, some of them not even be there in that place, let alone ever having anything to do with the bomb. So people understand that the police threw the bomb to disrupt this labor organization, or this labor organizing, right? To stop these so-called radicals, right? People who believed in things like safety at work, having a voice on the job, right? Do these sound kind of familiar? We hear these kind of things reverberating at different times, right? So we see these cycles, right? But this bomb exploded. These so-called radicals, these organizers fighting for an 8-hour workday, were arrested and many of them hung. And now we don't celebrate it in the US as an official holiday, but the rest of the world thinks about this May 1st, 1886 as International Workers' Day, okay? In the US we don't, even though it's here in Chicago. So you may have seen the protests in 2006 with immigrant rights marches. That's one way that people have tried to revive this holiday for workers. So just to give a piece of that, so Chicago's in the Chicago area, right? I know we're in Elgin, but the region, right? And Illinois in general is an important part of the labor movement's history. But I want to fast forward from there. You know, we had people fighting for something like that. People kept fighting. We eventually got the 8-hour workday as a standard, and not for all workers, but as kind of a norm, right? We got weekends, we got, you know, paid health insurance, these kind of things, right? But it's not without a lot of organizing. And so, just to fast forward then, this organizing kept going on. We had people formalizing the unions, but it was not recognized by the federal government until 1935, when after lots of organizing, lots of protests, sit-ins, often violent, often the police shooting people to protest, right, who were protesting. Finally, the government created the National Labor Relations Act, which created a board, the National Labor Relations Board, and provisions to make sure that workers were protected if they were organizing for a union, at least on paper, right? It's not to say that there wasn't violence sometimes after, but this tried to regulate, to say, okay, fine, if people want to organize for their rights at work, then they can do that, and they're not supposed to be punished. And if they're punished or retaliated against, or if their employer does anything against them, the employer has to face some consequences, right? So this changed the game, right? Suddenly there's national recognition that people should have the right to organize, okay? And so a lot of people continued to organize. We saw the explosion of more and more unions, right? And this is including through World War II, when we see lots of manufacturing. There was a big growth. That took us to the place in the middle of the century to have so many people unionized. At the same time, we started to see attacks from people who were invested in making sure that they had a lot of money to try to push back on this. So we have the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947. And what this did was it allowed for what we now call right to work. Have you guys heard of this term? What does it mean, right to work?
Right to work laws, I think, are when you say, well, you have to, if people want to work and not join the union, they should be able to get the job anyway. Yep.
So we have a lot of states that are like so-called right to work. Those of us in the movement call it right to work for less, right? I grew up in Kansas. It was just known that it was not a very union-friendly state, because a lot of places, even if they were unionized, and there was a much lower unionization rate than here in Illinois, you could be working at a place and not pay into the union, not pay into the contract, even though you got the same exact benefits that the people who were paying into and supporting the union would get. So imagine what that does. It weakens the union. If people can choose to not be a part of it, it makes it a lot weaker. You get weaker contracts, right? So it allowed for that. It allowed for the government to step in and stop boycotts, declare state of emergency. It weakened what was in the National Labor Relations Act, right? So I just want to set that up because what we see from there, and then through the 1970s, we see neoliberalization. You might have heard that in class, right? We see where there's more emphasis globally on privatization, redistributing the wealth to higher up to the 1%, and also a tax on unions, moving factories to other countries for lower wages, right? So we've seen this big shift, and so along with other interests, like a big decline in unions. And that's where we are today, right? A lot of other pieces, which we would love to get into, but just to give a taste of, we saw the growth of people fighting to get unions. We saw it established formally and recognized within the federal government. And then we saw attacks on the unions. And then we're seeing that still today, right? So this idea of right to work used to be in particular places, but now we're seeing it the past decade in states that have been strong union places, like Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, right? Our current governor is trying to do everything he can to attack unions, right? And this is not a partisan statement, I want to be very clear. This has nothing to do with Republican or Democrats in terms of me saying something bad about a particular party, but we do see interests that are trying to do this, okay? Including some Democrats, I want to be very clear. And then we're bringing this up because what we're seeing is in states that have not been traditional unionized states, which the teachers' union representatives, and hopefully they'll speak a little to this, but like Oklahoma, like West Virginia, like Kentucky, like Colorado, these are not places that we think of having long unionization, but we're seeing people fighting back, right? And what we argue here is if we don't fight back, then we won't get any of the crumbs, right? We want more than the crumbs, right? We want to do more than survive, we want to thrive, we want to have a bigger piece of this pie. We've seen since the 70s in particular too, that the bigger amounts of the production and profits that have been made in our nation have gone increasingly, exponentially to owners and to the so-called 1%, right? Whereas the rest of us, you know, our minimum wage should be around $22 now for the minimum wage if we kept up with inflation. That should blow your mind, right? We're fighting to maybe get up to $13 or $15, right? Over like years. So we're just putting this out there to think about what do we want in our society, as you all, if you're not already working, soon will be, what do you want, right? What do you think you should deserve when you're doing all this work and you want to make sure that you can take care of your families, right? This is why we're here, to talk about unions are a key vehicle for people to be able to do that. And it's been important for the basic levels of working conditions and standards that we have. And as we see them being attacked, we see our standards being attacked as well. And so that's why we want you guys to understand a little bit more about the labor movement, and hopefully we can answer more questions as we get in there. I just want to mention that the organization that I run, what we do is trainings for union members. We have a labor leadership program where we train union members and reps and folks who are at worker centers or other kind of organizations about how to stand up for your rights, how to organize, how to collectively bargain, how to do arbitration if something goes through the grievance process, and also about labor history. We do trainings for unions and community organizations that request that as well. We also work with high schoolers to make sure that high schoolers increasingly know about this labor history. So that is very small, but we want to try to let people know that there is a labor history that's worth fighting for, and that as they go into work too, that they can negotiate for things. And it's easier to negotiate things when you're not alone. And so that's the idea of a union, is being together in a collective group, right? So as we end today, if you have more questions about our programs, want to get more involved, let me know. But we do work with unions like the other panelists that you're going to hear from to try to make sure that we have a good standard of living and justice in the workplace for all workers. So with that, I want to pass it on to our other speakers. I'll let them introduce themselves. But first we have Kim, who's going to speak about her work. So.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Kim. So I'm Kim Tarver, and I teach in the health professions. And my education was to become a physical therapist. And I worked as a physical therapist for several years before I came to ECC. A little bit of history about ECC. The college was founded in the 1950s and did not have a teachers union until the late 1970s. The reason they formed, primarily two issues. One was equity, because there was a lot of disparity between women and men and compensation. And also, the institution was kind of happy to be able to say, what do you do? And it outlined the requirements of being hired as a faculty member and what the job performance expectations were. So we are a union of professionals. And the teachers on this campus know what is successful in the classroom and on campus. And we also know that education goes on outside of these walls. And I know when you came on campus, you said, wow, this place is lovely, it's beautiful. And we know it's not like this everywhere, and we care about that. So we advocate for equity and funding across the state and the country. We are involved in economic and social justice issues that can be achieved through education. So we really keep our eye on what's happening with educational programming, policies that are being looked at and developed across the state. And one thing I would just say to you, I still practice as a physical therapist, and I think you might know that healthcare is kind of a mess in some respects. But myself and many other practitioners, I wish that we would unionize because we're making decisions about your healthcare based on funding, based on what insurance companies will pay. And that's wrong. And I see education going in the same direction. We're making decisions, policies about what goes on in the classroom and your communities based on money. And I'm not talking about money that's available in taxes. I'm talking about turning education into a profit center. There are people that want to privatize what happens in your classroom. One of the benefits that we have here, and she talked about working conditions and compensation and insurance, but one thing that we have when we're members of the union is we have a fearless ability to question authority without retribution. We can participate in a free exchange of ideas. We can participate or work toward having this institution function in a democratic manner. And I think that we kind of do, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes there's things that are happening and we're like, wait, what happened? Where did that even come from? How come we weren't part of that conversation? And so when those things come up, the union steps forward and says, hey, wait a minute, hold the horses. That affects my working conditions. That affects our ability to do what we think is best for students. Again, we are a union of professionals. We do things outside the community. We support literacy. We work towards filling in the gap for our students who have food insecurity in the community as well. We work for equity and diversity initiatives, and those things are very real on our campus. We focus on that in hiring and retention. And you might not know, but there are things like that are happening behind the scenes that we're fighting for those rights. In fact, when I first joined the union, my grandpa was really very proud of me, and he wasn't the most, I would say, tolerant person. He died when he was 94. However, in the 1960s, they bombed his house because he was trying to make it so that African American men could join the union in the city of Chicago, ironworkers. And he did that because it's the right thing. It wasn't what he thought. He ascribed to these principles of solidarity, of equity, empowerment, and democracy. And those are the basic tenets of unionism. So we stay active, and I am pretty active in our union because I want to make sure that our members are educated and actively engaged in actions to make sure that the things that we care about don't disappear. And I care about my students, and I care about, even though you're not one of my students, I don't see any of my students, I care about you. I care about what happens to you when you leave this place. We want to make sure that we are one of the best community colleges in the country. Certainly we think the state, right? We're committed to your education. I think that's enough. Did I go over my 5 minutes? Is that good? All right. Who's next?
All right, Jamie.
Hello? Okay. Good morning. My name is Jamie Pang, and I'm representing the support staff of Elgin Community College Association. They mentioned earlier we're SSECCA, so it's SSECCA. We were formed and organized in 1985 so that we could have a voice in our working conditions. And in the beginning, we had less than 100 members, but today we have about 350 members, and we are all over campus. And when I say all over campus, I mean in every department and in lots of positions. I'm going to just highlight a few so that you can understand who we are and where we are on campus, but at the Q&A portion, if you want to try and stump me for who might be in a department that is SSECCA, I'm happy to answer those. But the child care workers in daycare, they're SSECCA. The food service workers in the cafeteria are also union members. Our custodians who keep this place clean are part of our union. The admissions recruiters who welcomed you when you came to ECC, those people are part of our union. The first stop desk in Building A, those people are also part of our union that help you with registration. Kind of behind the scenes, the information technology folks, IT, who run the computer labs and support all the systems that you use in order to be able to learn, the distance learning platforms, the computer labs, the portal, our overall network, those folks are a part of our union. Academic advising, who help you with degree planning and transfer plans, those folks are a part of our union. The grounds and maintenance, when we have to plow snow in April and keep the lawn mowed and looking nice. What makes our campus so beautiful is the grounds and maintenance folks. The financial aid assistants who helped you with your FAFSA or with scholarships, those folks are a part of our union. Veteran services, the support and resources that we have there, that position's in our union. The testing assistants, when you took placement testing, and if you go down for other classes, makeup tests and things like that, those people are part of SSECCA. And last but not least, of course, you have to pay your bills, so whoever's in student accounts, those people at the front desk, those are also people in our union. So as you can see, you've got a lot of support in us across campus, and you might see our door tags in office spaces and such to identify who we are. Let us know what you need, because we're here for you. I mean, those are the positions that are here for you, that support you, because whether we're behind the scenes or the frontline folks, we are here to contribute to your success. So a little bit about myself. I'm only turning 10 this year at ECC, but I've had the privilege to negotiate 3 contracts, and that spanned from 2011 through 2020. And when I started, this little booklet here, I did not know how important this was going to be. I've come to know this, which is our contract, to be the lifeline. And so I want to share a little bit about that. SSECCA's philosophy has always been, in the 30 years that we've been in existence, to use interest-based bargaining, which is IBB. It means that we're hard on the issues and soft on the people. And for us, that means, we're able to focus on the real issues and concerns and be able to come up with kind of mutually beneficial solutions for both sides. And it allows us to be a little bit more creative, too, when we need to be. So, of course, when you're negotiating, you're not always going to get what you want. The nice thing about this method is that it provides a common understanding. So for those things that we kind of have to land on, that we live with, we at least know that if somebody's coming in and they're saying, no, you can't have that, we are at least discussing that, and we know why things are the way they are, the reasons behind that. So some of the things that we've gained in the time, or I've enjoyed actually from the contract being in existence, is spring break, winter break, and Fridays off in the summer. Because believe it or not, there was a time where support staff were on campus during spring break and winter break when no one else was. Also, we enjoy reduction in force, or otherwise known as layoff protections, and a sick leave bank. So those are just some, to name a few. I've been able to be personally involved in some gains, and those have been the equity for our part-timers. They're in our unit, and previously they received paid time off, and when they first started at college, they had to wait a whole year and then some in order to get paid time off. So imagine starting here and not being able to take any time off. We were able to work with the administration to come up with a solution where now they accrue as they go, so they don't have to wait a whole year or more in order to get some vacation time. We were also able to recognize their years of service. So the longer that you were working here at ECC, you got a little bit more, and the full-timers have enjoyed that for some time, but again, we were able to get that equity for part-timers. We've also been able to ensure in the last 3 contracts that there have been compensation gains for everyone in the membership, whether you're part-time, full-time, no matter whatever your status was, we were able to get you some type of compensation gains. And last but not least, this is the most important that I think we would all agree to, is that protecting and keeping what's in our contract is super important every time we go to the negotiation table. I mean, that's what unions do, and it recognizes our rights, and that's why we do what we do. And so I'm gonna borrow the quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which he says, "The time is right to do what is right," or it's always right to do what is right. So that's why we always continue to do what we do, support student successes and workplace equity. So thanks for letting me share.
Good morning. My name is Brian McSherry. I'm with the Sheet Metal Workers Union Local 265. Kind of give you a brief overview. Most people don't know what sheet metal workers do. I wouldn't expect a lot of people here to know, but we do the heating and air conditioning of these auditoriums, these buildings. We also, a few years ago, we merged with the rail workers union, so now we're officially known as SMART. It's Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Union. My union covers 9 counties that surround Chicagoland. The only 2 we don't cover is Lake County and Cook County. Myself, I've been in the union since 1988. And since that time, and this is one of the things that we fight for as a building trades, good pay, benefits, health care. So since 1988, I've been paying into a retirement plan that when I get to the age of 62 or whenever I choose to retire, there's going to be something there for me. And that's kind of what we fight for. We fight for to make sure that everybody has a right to a dignified retirement and also a right to a dignified life. We fight for the wages of everybody. Now, one of the things that one of my jobs is I'm a union organizer. So I'm out there and I'm talking to people that are not in the union, and I'm trying to recruit them in. And I'll be honest with you, out there's a lot of opposition. People don't want to pay their dues. And that's usually one of the fights I always hear. You guys have to pay dues, we don't want to pay dues. And my kind of converse to that is they're taking most of the time $16 an hour less an hour than an average union sheet metal worker. And that's my argument back. I pay roughly $5,000 a year in union dues. They're paying $16 an hour non-union dues because they're actually taking less money so they don't have to pay a union due. It's kind of backwards thinking, but that's kind of where a lot of people come back. They always say the out of work list. And I'll tell you what, back in 2008 when the economy crashed, that was rough. I had grown men crying on the phone. They were going to lose everything. What we did is we as an organization, as building trades, we fought hard for, you'll see us out there pushing bills to get infrastructure done, to get vertical and horizontal work going in the economy. One of the things that, as a building trades, I'm with the Fox Valley Building Trades. Dr. Sam came to us about the expansion here at ECC and really wanted our support to try to help get this expansion going. It was I think it was 180 million, and the referendum had to go to the public. We pushed our members hard because it was jobs locally for everybody, and that difference was about 25 votes. I honestly believe that organized labor itself helped get this job done. That's the expansion of this campus that everybody here is probably benefiting from. But you're talking a matter of 25 votes. That was in the Fox Valley region, and in this area, there's probably about 8,000 building trades members that live in this area, plus their families that came out to vote and actually get this campus, get that referendum so the campus could be built. So there's many different views. I mean, I could drone on for hours on this, but I'll leave it at that.
So before we get into Q&A, I just want to give a couple more points to emphasize that came from our panelists. First of all, again and again, guys, studies show again and again, it's unrefutable. The standard of living for people is higher in the times and places there's higher unionization, when there's higher worker democracy and involvement in their workplace, right? Higher wages as a standard, higher levels of benefits, better health, right? Both access to health insurance, also paid time off, the things that some people take for granted, but they exist because people fight for them, okay? I know some of you might go on to be management someday. I would encourage you to think about your workplace is often gonna run a lot better if people have a voice in the workplace. Just think about, are you in classes sometimes, or have you been in classes where you didn't feel as respected, or maybe the teacher just kind of talked down to you or made busy work? Have you ever experienced that?
Never.
Were those your favorite classes, or were there classes where you got to speak up? You got to do work that you felt was meaningful, that you felt like the teacher respected you? Did you maybe prefer those classes more? And that's a crazy idea. But the same goes for work, right? When people feel like they can stay and retire somewhere, when they can invest in their future, when they feel respected, when they feel like they can speak up if they see problems, they like the work better, they're able to do the work better, especially if they can take a sick day and make sure that they're not sick and getting other people sick. These kind of things, right? The standards are higher, people's level of happiness and ability to do their best work is higher, right? So as a manager, it would be in your interest that people get to have a better standard of work, right? So just some things for us to think about. And also to think about, I think the points made in terms of public sector, people are often demonizing public sector workers, and part of it is because the public sector is more highly unionized. The public sector is also more disproportionately women and people of color in this industry, and yet we see the biggest attacks on unions against the public sector, right? Because we see high unionization rates, right? But the important thing is that when people have a voice in that, you have more people's heads in the game to figure out how to have the best funding, the best structures, as we talked about here at ECC. When more people feel like they have a voice and they don't have to be scared to speak up, but they also are actually brought to the table instead of always having to fight to get to the table, you see a healthier place. You have more people's good brain energy going to making decisions as opposed to just a couple people at the top, right? But I think the biggest point that I think is important here is that quite literally you don't have a right to keep your job. You can be laid off, fired, whatever, at any time if you don't have a union. You have labor protections when you have a union. So again, when we think about this, you're thinking about your future, you're expendable unless you have a way to fight back, unless you have a grievance procedure, unless you have processes to make sure that you're just not randomly laid off, right? And you can do it with other people. You're not alone. I think that's an important part of that as well. There's a lot of other things that we talked about though, so if we want to go into Q&A, because there's probably a lot of questions swirling around or feedback, we want to be able to tie that together.
So thank you, panel. So I think we're going to move into Q&A. We have a couple of mics set up. On this side, I'll go around with the mic, and we also have that one set up. So let's move into Q&A. Feel free to come down and ask a question. So please raise your hand. Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
All this time I've been talking.
I can hear you though.
Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Obviously you guys were talking about a lot of advantages of unionizing and stuff like that. What kind of disadvantages could you identify in unionizing? Because obviously not many people are in unions, so yeah, what kind of disadvantages do you guys see?
Disadvantages? Explain it a little bit. I mean, what do you mean by disadvantages?
So yeah, I don't know if there's like, when you sign up for a union, there's like, you're kind of tied into a contract with that union, so maybe an employee wants to step away from the union, and you may be able to do that, that would be a disadvantage to me, obviously not having the freedom to kind of.
Well, I'm going to go by building trades. There's nothing that says you have to stay with us. We've had members come and go over the years. Once you're vested into the pension, it's there for you when you go to retire. The disadvantages, I'm trying to figure out what if you leave, like with us, you work with us, you get 5 years, you get your pension vested, then you decide, you know what, I don't want to be in the union anymore, I don't want to pay dues, I don't want to do that. That pension's there for you. We will, if you went and did covered work, what we would consider our work, if we had taken the money to train you, you went through a 5-year apprenticeship with us, and with us, you don't pay anything. So you go through a 5-year apprenticeship, that's on us, that's on the members, we all contribute equally to it, so we can cover your expenses so you don't have to pay. Now, if you go out and do our covered work, doing whatever a sheet metal work or what we would consider our work, we would go after that money, so it's a disadvantage to you. The pension we could hold until you're 71, so it's also another disadvantage.
If you're not part of it.
Right, if you
You're
walk
not part of
away,
it.
but you do covered work. So I don't know if there's a disadvantage from by not being union. I'm still trying to, I guess, I don't see disadvantages. Don't get me wrong, not everybody wants to be union. People want to do their own thing, and that's completely fine. I mean, there's, when I go and talk to non-union workers, I know unions aren't for everybody. People want to make their own conditions. I actually had a worker tell me one time he would love to be union, but we expect him on the job 5 days a week. And he doesn't want to be there 5 days a week. He wants to go hunt, he wants to go fish, and he wants to do all different things. And if he had to work for a union, we'd expect him there. So the disadvantages, I really don't.
That was probably the biggest thing, like, just so you feel like tied into something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and let me just say too, this kind of work is a particular kind of job. Most times your union contract is affiliated with the place that you work. So, if they decided to work at a community college that was not union, it's their choice to not have as many rights, as good of a wage, as good of benefits. You have that right to go to another community college and not have as good of a working life, right? Few people are going to make that choice, right? And hopefully, if you were to move, it would be to organize a new union. But the whole thing is, unions in general. Again, they're human organizations, but if you are in a union, you have a voice, both in your union but at your workplace. And if you do not have that voice. You risk being alone, singled out, and not having other people to come to your protection. You have to negotiate your conditions on your own. And we know statistically, women, folks of color, folks who are younger, do not ask for raises or feel entitled or secure to ask for anything like, better office materials, right? If you're together with other people, you have more solidarity. You have people who to do it together. And it's not just on you as an individual, right? You guys want to say something?
I think one of the disadvantages is it's a lot of work. And it is a lot of work to organize a group of people, and that in itself has some problems and challenges. But I would just say that we are stronger together.
Yep.
We have when we come together on really important issues and have one voice, it matters.
Yep.
And we have an impact, and without that, we don't.
As an appointment for a collective bargaining unit approaching something like Cook County, why has your union, which lays rail and deals with infrastructural projects such as HVAC, have you not explored that area, unionizing personnel?
Can you repeat that first part again?
as a frontman for a collective bargaining unit, why have your unit not approached Cook County as a large unit for possible unionization?
Well, Cook County has their own sheet metal workers union out there. Ours are like in the state of Illinois, there's 7 different sheet metal worker unions. Mine is 265 out in Cook and Lake County. It's 73 out in Rockford. There's 7 different. So they are unionized out there in the Chicagoland area. Roughly 6,000 active sheet metal workers are unionized.
These are interconnected?
We're connected through our international. We deal with each other on a daily basis. We talk. A lot of the contractors, my union represents roughly about 170 contractors. They go into Cook County and Lake County and vice versa. So there's that area is pretty strong union. Our 9 counties and the 2 Lake and Cook, so about 11 counties are pretty. It's a dense union area.
We've got a couple questions over here, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a member of the Teachers Union here at Elgin Community College that Kim talked about. And I'm a strong supporter of teachers unions. And teachers unions get slandered in our culture. And I just want to say teachers unions are the salt of the earth. Okay? Teachers unions have made America great. Okay? Don't let people slander them. They're terribly slandered. That's one thing. The other thing is the teachers are in the streets right now in this country. And I'm old, and I've never seen anything quite like this before. Statewide teacher strikes with large demonstrations in state capitals day after day. This is kind of a historic moment for the labor movement and for public sector unions. And I just want to encourage you all to support the teachers that are in the streets.
To follow up with that, I guess as we're here to learn how to be better critical thinkers. And I know we're obviously coming with a particular opinion and unapologetically, but I do want us to think about who gains from talking about teachers' unions? Who is that for? What does that do for all of us, and whose interest is it for us to think that teachers don't deserve a union, don't deserve high wages, who are doing the work of building democracy and educated citizenry, right? Fundamental to our democracy. Why shouldn't teachers get crazy high pay? Why shouldn't we expect that there's good benefits, right? I just want us to think about that, and to whose benefit is it when we're cutting down teachers' unions? And also, who's disproportionately still teachers? Women, right? So I just want us to think critically, why are we hearing certain things in the news that say, well, they really are greedy with getting a pension. Really? You're greedy with creating a society of educated people? And then you want to be able to retire? I just want us to think about whose interest is that serving? So thank you for that.
So I just want to thank you all for coming to talk to us, first of all. Second, I had a question. So I used to be in the logistics industry, and I remember having to sign a memorandum before I actually got hired saying that I was not allowed to actually try to start a union for our industry. And then I came to find out that that's actually not even allowed. Right. So I guess what can I do? I'm no longer in the industry, but what can I do? I still have a lot of friends that are in there. What can I do to assure them that if they wanted to get together and start? Because one of the reasons I got out and decided to go to school full time was because I was just miserable, and pay was horrible, and there was times where they literally would give you a review that was just bad, so they didn't have to give you a raise. And it was just a lot of things that just made my life miserable in the logistics industry. And one thing that I keep getting back when I tell people that they should start trying to start a union is that paper that they sign, and they think they're going to get fired, and some of them are obviously need the job to provide for their families. What can I do to assure them that they can't get fired because of that?
You guys want to say something first? Wow, no.
Yeah.
I know that's illegal. I am privileged that I came into a very strong union when I was hired here. And I know that the battle has been fought by many people. I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We all do. I don't even know where to begin at that level of organizing, so I would defer to an expert. Are you the expert to ask?
Well, I would just say that, so the law that I mentioned before from 1935, the National Labor Relations Act, that protects concerted activity of any worker. So somebody who's not in a union, you can be undocumented. It does not matter if you work in the so-called United States, right? You have the right for concerted activity, and that means organizing with another person, right? So not just you alone, but you have the right to do protests, to write a letter to the editor, to call out companies that are violating labor laws, and then even to call out workplaces that are not necessarily violating a law, but doing things that are not just, right? So people have that protection regardless of their immigration status, regardless of anything, right? You have protection of concerted activity. Now, management can still do crazy stuff. People still get fired or worse, right? Worse meaning maybe, especially if there's immigrants, right? Threats or actions of calling ICE, calling the police on anybody, right? And we know that can be very dangerous for a lot of people, right? Or just firing people or saying things about their name when they try to go get another job, right? We know that that's true, and so I would just emphasize the importance of it. It's brought up again about solidarity, right? So the more that we talk with other people and you're standing up and being public, I know we were talking about counterintuitive, the more public you are with taking concerted activity, the better protected you are, because then it's easier to prove that I was fired or retaliated against or something like that, targeted because I was trying to protect or enact my labor rights. You have more protections, right? So just in any kind of case, if you are interested in speaking up, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but these are the basic fundamentals of the National Labor Relations Act, right? You are able to speak up. And you're able to speak up in a group. So talking to even one other coworker and presenting these things and being public and trying to get community support, all of these things help, push the tide. And I just want to emphasize, I know I'm focusing on immigrants, but just because we think about the most vulnerable populations, not just especially this time, in all times, but right now it's really bad, we know this, right? People fight for their rights all the time. Farm workers, domestic workers, people who have no legal right to have a union still stand up, right? They still have a right for protected concerted activity, right? People who are temp workers, I know you have a lot of temp staffing industry out here in Elgin, and they are gruesome conditions, right? You send people who don't have training, who are scared, and who need to make some money and exploit them in factories, these formerly good factory unionized jobs. They didn't all move to other countries. Many of them are out here in Elgin and other suburban areas, right? But now there's a concerted use of immigrant workers who are presumed or who are undocumented, or people who are living in halfway houses, right? Who have some kind of state control or fear, right, to speak up. That's an intentional move, right? But they still have rights. So I just want us to feel encouraged that even those amongst us who have the least protections can and do speak up and stand up, but we're always stronger together and we're always better protected. And it's the only way the conditions change, right? So this thing that you're saying, which is blatantly illegal, to make people sign that they won't organize for a union, is really common. And you'll see it in different kinds of words, in professional jobs, in low-wage service jobs, right, in any kind of jobs. The only way that that stops happening and becoming the norm and scaring people is by people speaking up. It's the only way.
I would just add on that, that's not the first time we've ever heard that story. Right. And there's a playbook. Yep. And so our union, the Elgin Community College Faculty Association, is part of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and we're part of the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and we're under that umbrella organization, the AFL-CIO. Mm-hmm. I would start with one of those organizations and say, can you give me a playbook? Because organizing is outlined. There are best practices. There are steps that you can take. But not having done that from the beginning, I can't walk you through that process. But I know that those guidelines exist.
Yep.
Okay, we have a question on this side.
In high school, there was a presenter from a bigger college, and they talked about what we should do to get hired for a job, like the resume stuff. He explained the story when he was young that he wanted to work for a retailer, and then so he was introduced to everything, and then when he asked for the wage, like what would I get paid, he said that's when the person hiring would say like, oh, I see I wasted my time. And so he warned us about that. And then like it always stood out to me, like why would someone come into this high school and tell us not to ask for like a wage? And unfortunately, a lot of the youth coming out of high school and still in high school are in jobs right now that they get underpaid and overworked. I was working at Elgin Company. I would be working like 6-7 hours and I wouldn't get a break, you know? And they said it was a loophole, but like I never heard of a loophole, but I know the law, you know? And I was gonna ask, like, do you guys have any plans to educate like the youth, or like any plans to sort of like put in a class for, you know, high school students? Like, you know, do you have any anything to introduce people to that?
Yeah, so one thing that the DePaul Labor Education Center that I direct, what we do is, in fact, that we go to high schools and we do a collective bargaining role play where high schoolers get to sit on the side of either management or a union in a fictional hospital and negotiate a contract. So to experience, you know, we talked about the interest-based bargaining, to see what it is like to try to make sure that both sides get their needs at least partially met, but also to introduce these very ideas to people. And then we also have a summer school. So I'm saying all of this because if you are still connected with a high school or have, you know, family members in high schools and they want to start this program, we're happy to come work with you. And also we have a summer program for kids to come for 1 week downtown and to learn more about labor history, take a field trip down to the Pullman district down on the south side of Chicago to learn, you know, one of the biggest strikes in history. But to also learn about the future of work and think about, you know, how to get good jobs. We also have an internship where kids can, if they've gone through that program, can get paid to get involved in a union organizing campaign. And that's specifically for high schoolers because there's not many resources. And I think your point is really important, and it goes back to why we wanted to do this. And anytime that people can have a conversation, go like, oh no, like you should ask any other part of your life that you go into something, you ask, what are the conditions? You get a cell phone, what are the conditions? How long is my contract, right? I mean, anything, right? So yes, you are totally right. Like it's absurd that you shouldn't ask what wage you're gonna get. That's just basic. But part of it is spreading the word. And we worked, so I was an IFT member, the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and we work with teachers all over. And we think that's a really important venue for people to have this. What else would you guys think?
I would say that elections have consequences. Your school board members are elected. I live in Batavia. We had a high school teacher that was doing some real innovative kinds of things in the classroom, and people didn't like that. So this contract gives us some academic freedom and ability, but at the K-12, I know there's more control on what is taught and how it's taught. So there are constraints that cannot be undone. That person was protected. Here at the college, I mean, this is happening right now, so I applaud both Antonio and Parul for putting this together. But you could have this experience in the classroom, you know, if students could organize and try to have some negotiation with their instructors on, you know, maybe a little bit. I try to give my students some choice. They would say maybe I don't, but take some risks in the classroom and practice that. But you've got to know who you're voting for, and you've got to participate in that process. And if you want something like that to happen, then you should talk to those school board members that you're electing. And, you know, that's not a huge elected official position. It's not like voting for the president or the governor. But that has immediate and direct consequences on what's happening in your schools.
We have another question over here.
Yeah, let's take maybe 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. Each person to some closing thoughts.
Hi, my name is Richard. I want to thank you guys for you guys' work too. I support the unions. I got a question. So the recent police union just made a deal, and they got undermined by their union, sold out. Basically, this is what I've heard from the nursing union. And now the Cook County Hospital is also trying to do it again to the nursing union there, where they're trying to sell them out without giving information to the actual nurses and just working one-on-one within the room to keep it secret. How are the unions now going to fight this? Now, since they did it to the police force, now they're moving to the nurses, and maybe soon even move it on to the teachers. So where are the unions going to go in the direction of fighting this now?
Well, they're not rolling over. And they do what they can do, and there's a fine line of things to walk. So I know in our past contract negotiations, we're always having to think about the public support, and we're always having to think about what's achievable, and not be unrealistic, because losing is not good for your reputation. So I don't know the nuances of either of those examples that you gave me, but if they're a union, they're not rolling over. They're doing everything they can within the limitations of the law and the limitations of their contract. And sometimes we lose. We fight really hard to keep what we have. I'm not sure, what the role that money is playing or politics in that. I don't question the integrity of the union leaders, though, at that local level. I do not. I think that they're working really hard, the best of their ability. I don't know what else to say about that, though, but knowing what happens here in our institution, and when things not to that level that you're talking about happen, we fight hard and we work really hard to undo what we can. And sometimes there's compromises that while we hate it, we have to walk away because it's not achievable.
I'm going to just piggyback on that. It's the same. I mean, you have to know what your rights are, and you have to know what's fair. Like, we know what is fair for the support staff union, knowing that we work here. We're not unreasonable. We know what's fair for us, and we fight for that. We know what's right, and, we have to stay on the line and fight for that. So if you're already formed, I mean, that's something that you have to do. You have to support your leadership. You have to have that structure within here at ECC for us, and the same for faculty. And, when we have joint issues, we work on those together, because all of us collectively together, is the entire school pretty much. So for us, that's how we preserve.
And we can go on strike, but nurses and police officers can't. And there are rules around that too.
I don't know the specifics of their unions.
Or there's different laws about that based on public and different pieces. But nurses can, it just all depends on the thing. And I would just say too that a union is a human organization, and I don't know these particular fights, but if membership are unhappy with the direction of what's going on in their local, they're members and they have a vote, right? So to say, as any of you hopefully go into unions, to remember, the union is the members. The members should be very, very involved in decision making, electing officials that they feel represent them the best. So I'll just say that it's a human organization that people gotta participate in, right? So, and I have nothing to say to those specific examples, but when you hear those complaints, sometimes you often have to ask, well, are the members involved? Do they go to membership meetings? Do they ask questions? Do they run for office? And that's how we have strong unions that are as equitable as possible and as strong as possible. So that's just something I would say. What do you speak to that?
Well, kind of just listening to what you said, and I don't know the specifics, but that's a typical management type of tactic. It's a divide and conquer.
Yep.
So if we have, I'm just going to guess, 100 people in that bargaining unit, and if I start chipping away at each one individually, I weaken the union.
Yeah.
I weaken the core. As a building trade, it's a violation of our collective bargaining agreement to individually negotiate. Mm-hmm. So if I'm contractor A and we have our set rate, what we're supposed to get paid. If you want to go above and beyond that, that's up to you. But to take away a person and say, I will give you this, that's a violation of our agreement. So it's not just what you said. I was sitting here thinking it was a divide and conquer type of mentality. If we can break away at the interior of the union eventually will go away, because that's what their whole point is. That they'd rather individually negotiate with you instead of dealing with a collective bargaining unit.
So I know folks have to go to class. If you have 2 more minutes, please hold tight. I just want to ask each of the panelists to leave us with some closing remarks. And can we start at the end? Can you share something with us? Take home for the rest of the day. Jamie?
Oh, wow. This is a lot of pressure. I guess just to recap then, I mean, know what your rights are. I mean, that's what the unions are for here. But if you're going to go into higher education, there's also, besides support staff here, which is Elgin Community College, there is educational support professionals, I think, which are within like the K through 12. So if you are going to be in a union, get involved, you know, make sure you're engaged, make sure, I mean, there's different levels of involvement. You don't have to be at the top. You don't need to be the president, but there are things you can do to contribute to your union to make it strong, to have that power. The other thing then, if you aren't going into those professions, is to consider, you know, the things that have been going on that we see that are unfair, that are social movements. It's not just the rights of what we have here at ECC. We support the undocumented students. We've been doing initiatives with that, with the faculty union, with the equity and pay. That's not a concern when it comes into unions, but the larger picture, it is. And that doesn't mean that we're not involved, and I believe we even started some of these movements. So those are union initiated, and so you can take advantage of the unions that surround you or that you know of as you move through your career, and take advantage of the fact that we have the power and strength and the collectiveness of us all.
Could you each cite your union or your organization?
Sure. I was with SSECCA, which is the support staff of Elgin Community. SSECCA.
Thank you.
I'm with the Elgin Community College Faculty Association, and we're local 3791 under IFT. I guess my takeaway would be, it's difficult. What you do matters. Where I shop makes a difference. I try to support union members because I think that we're all working for the same thing. If you're part of a union, you're not out for yourself. You're out for each other. And I think that's one of the most important things, that we have each other's back. Not because we want to support bad workers or bad people, but because we want to have a voice. I'd rather that we are participating in making decisions than people who are only worried about a profit, because we're more than that.
Brian McSherry, Sheet Metal Workers, Local 265. You know, it's out there, the unions, we are out there fighting for everybody, either whether you're a union or not. I've always aspired to the economic theory of rising water raises all boats, and I always kind of look at it as a union as that water. We try to make sure even the non-union people's money that they're making is higher, because I always think about it this way: if there wasn't a union around, what do you think you'd be making? What do you think your rights are as a worker? What do you think your pensions would be? We're here and they're still trying to strip it away. So that's a
It's a good segue. I just wanted, just a last thought, just as you move forward, again, I just reiterating what other folks have said. I mean, we're stronger together, guys. We know things are really complicated right now in our society, and the way that we combat that and make sure that there's social, racial, class justice is by having democratic institutions like unions and helping rise all boats, like you said. And so we just really hope that any kind of occupation you go into, professional, other kinds of jobs, that you know your rights, stay in touch. If you want to know more about different industries, happy to stay in touch, give you my card, talk about different kinds of occupations and support that you can get. But just know your rights and share them with other people, and keep asking critical questions, which is what we're hoping you're learning in school. So, and thank you for having us here.
How about a round of applause? So we want to thank you for attending our event on behalf of Professor Ramirez and I. Hopefully we've given you some things to think about. We'll be here for a few minutes if you have individual questions. Have a great day.